The giant baby screamed so loud that the whole village woke up. I still remember that morning, the way it rattled my chest and sent shivers up my spine. It wasn't a normal baby's cry. It was deeper, heavier, like the sound of thunder crashing in the hills. It was the sound of life and death wrapped into one. Lami was gone. She had died during childbirth, her small body unable to bring the giant baby into the world. The baby, though, had survived. He lay in Omari's arms, his wails shaking the walls of the small hut by the river. As I approached that hut, I felt the weight of it all. Lami's bravery, Omari's grief, the baby's strength. It was too much for one morning. But I couldn't turn away. None of us could. Looking back, it all started long before that moment. Lami wasn't the kind of girl who stood out. She wasn't the loudest or the boldest, but there was something about her that made people stop and listen. She had a calm presence, like the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. Her family lived on the edge of the village, near the maize fields. They were farmers, like most of us, and Lami spent her days working under the sun. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, and while her sisters were quick to argue or laugh loudly, Lami was different. Even as a child, she had always been quiet, but not shy. She moved with purpose, like someone who was always thinking about the next thing she needed to do. People in the village often called her the gentle one because she rarely raised her voice or showed anger. But her quietness wasn't weakness. No, Lami had a strength that came from within. She was the kind of person who noticed things others missed. If a bird's wing was broken, Lami would find it and nurse it back to health. If an old woman struggled to carry firewood, Lami would appear at her side without a word. In our village, girls like Lami were admired but misunderstood. She didn't seem interested in the things most of the other girls cared about. While others dreamed of marriage, children, and big ceremonies, Lami seemed content with the small things, helping her parents in the fields, weaving baskets, or sitting under the shade of the big baobab tree, watching the wind dance through the tall grass. I used to wonder what was going on in her mind during those quiet moments. Was she dreaming of a life beyond the village? Or was she simply happy with what she had? Then there was Omari. Omari's story began long before Lami ever walked to the river. He had arrived in Majiwa when he was just a boy, abandoned by traders who claimed he was too much trouble. Even as a child, Omari was different. He was big, much bigger than any boy his age. His shoulders were broad, his hands so large they looked like they belonged to a grown man. The villagers, though kind enough to take him in, didn't know what to do with him. At first, they thought he might have been sent by the spirits, a gift of strength to help with the heavy work of farming and building. But as he grew, their fear of him grew too. Omari didn't speak much, and his size made him stand out in a way that was hard to ignore. The children didn't play with him. He tried to join their games, but when he ran, his steps shook the ground. When he threw a ball, it went so far no one could fetch it. Slowly, he stopped trying, retreating into himself. As the years passed, Omari's strength became legendary. He could carry sacks of grain that took 3 men to lift, and he once pulled a fallen tree out of the river with his bare hands. But no matter how much he helped, people still kept their distance. By the time he was a man, Omari had built himself a small hut by the river. He lived alone, tending to his garden and fishing for his meals. The villagers left food at his door, but never stayed to talk. Some said he was cursed, that his size and strength were unnatural. Omari didn't argue. He accepted their fear and stayed out of their way. The day Lami met Omari was an ordinary day. The sun was high, the air was heavy with heat, and the village seemed to move in slow motion. Lami had gone to fetch water from the river, balancing her clay pot on her head. Most girls her age would have avoided the river if they saw Omari sitting there. He wasn't threatening, but his sheer size was intimidating. His massive frame seemed to blend with the landscape, like he was part of the earth itself. But Lami wasn't most girls. She walked up to him without hesitation, her pot swaying on her head. "You're always alone," she said, her voice gentle but curious. Omari looked at her, startled. It had been years since someone had spoken to him so directly. "It's better that way," he replied, his voice low and cautious. "Is it?" Lami asked, tilting her head. Omari didn't know how to respond. He wasn't used to questions like that. Most people avoided him, and when they did speak to him, it was only to ask for help or offer a quick thanks. Lami didn't wait for an answer. She knelt by the riverbank, dipping her pot into the cool water. Omari watched her, unsure of what to say or do. When she stood up to leave, she turned to him and smiled. "I'll see you again," she said simply. And she did. From that day on, Lami made it a habit to visit the river more often. At first, she kept her distance, greeting Omari with a simple nod or a small smile before settling by the water's edge. She brought her clay pot, but sometimes she didn't fetch water at all. Instead, she'd sit quietly, letting the sound of the river fill the silence between them. Omari found it strange at first. He wasn't used to company, especially not someone like Lami, who didn't seem afraid of him. She didn't ask him for anything, didn't tell him to leave, didn't avoid his gaze. Slowly, he began to relax. One day, Lami brought a small loaf of bread wrapped in banana leaves. She placed it on the rock beside him without a word. Omari hesitated, his large hands hovering over the offering. "You don't eat enough," Lami said, breaking the silence. "I see you out here fishing and working in your garden, but you're thin. Too thin for someone as strong as you." Omari didn't know how to respond. No one had ever commented on his strength like that, like it was a good thing, not something to be feared. He picked up the bread, his fingers brushing against the banana leaves. "Thank you," he said softly. Lami smiled, and for the first time in years, Omari felt something other than loneliness. As the weeks turned into months, their friendship deepened. Lami started spending longer stretches of time by the river, often bringing small gifts, fruits, nuts, or handmade trinkets. Omari, in turn, taught her how to fish. "It's all in the wrist," he said one afternoon, demonstrating how to cast a line into the water. Lami tried, her first few attempts clumsy and awkward. Omari laughed, a deep, rumbling sound that startled the birds in the trees. It was the first time Lami had heard him laugh, and she couldn't help but join in. "You'll get it," he said, his voice full of encouragement. "It just takes practice." Their laughter echoed across the water, and for a moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. But the village was never far away, and the people of Majiwa were always watching. At first, the whispers were soft, barely audible over the hum of daily life. "She's spending too much time at the river," one woman said, shaking her head as she pounded cassava into flour. "It's not proper," another added. "A girl like her, alone with someone like him? It's shameful." By the time Lami's visits became a daily occurrence, the whispers had turned into open gossip. Her family tried to intervene. One evening, her father confronted her as she returned home, her empty pot balanced on her head. He stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face a mask of anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "At the river," Lami replied calmly. "With him?" Lami didn't answer. Her father's voice rose, each word sharp and cutting. "Do you know what people are saying about you? Do you know what this is doing to our families?" "I don't care what they say," Lami replied, her voice steady. "Omari is kind. He's not what you think he is." Her father's face turned red with anger. "He's not like us, Lami. He's dangerous. He doesn't belong here, and neither will you if you keep this up." Lami met his gaze without flinching. "He belongs as much as anyone else. More than some, I'd say." Her father had no reply to that. He stormed into the house, leaving Lami standing alone under the fading light of the setting sun. The village's fear of Omari ran deep, rooted in stories that had been passed down since he first arrived. They spoke of his strength as if it were a curse, a burden too heavy for any one person to carry. Some claimed he was the child of a spirit, born of the earth and destined to bring destruction. Others said he was a punishment sent by the ancestors, a reminder of some long-forgotten sin. Omari, for his part, never gave them any reason to fear him. He worked quietly, kept to himself, and avoided conflict. But his very existence was enough to unsettle the villagers. When Lami began spending time with him, it was as if she had crossed an invisible line, one that no one else dared to approach. The villagers didn't just gossip about her. They watched her every move, their disapproval written in their eyes. The children were the first to stop talking to her. They used to run to her whenever she passed by, tugging on her skirt and begging her to tell them stories. But now, they stayed away, their parents' warnings ringing in their ears. Even the women at the market began to distance themselves. They no longer greeted her with warm smiles or offered her the best fruits. Instead, they turned their backs, whispering behind their hands as she walked by. Lami noticed, of course. How could she not? But she didn't let it bother her. She held her head high and went about her day as if nothing had changed. In truth, she had never felt more alive. Lami and Omari's bond deepened with every passing day, but their closeness didn't go unnoticed. By the time the first rains of the season came, the whole village was whispering about them. What had begun as quiet gossip grew louder, bolder, until it was no longer confined to hushed conversations in the market or fields. "She's bewitched," an elder woman declared one afternoon as she sat weaving a basket under the shade of the baobab tree. What else would make her choose someone like him? No woman in her right mind would do that. "It's a disgrace," a man muttered as he sharpened his machete. Her father should do something before it's too late. But Lami didn't care. If she heard the whispers, she didn't let them show. Every morning, she went to the river with her clay pot, her steps light and unhurried. By now, it wasn't just about fetching water. The river had become her sanctuary, and Omari, her friend. Or perhaps more than a friend. One evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, Lami lingered by the river longer than usual. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth, the river swollen from the recent rains. Omari was mending a fishing net, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy as he tied each knot. "Why don't you ever come to the village?" Lami asked, breaking the comfortable silence between them. Omari paused, his hands stilling. "You know why? They don't understand you," Lami said softly. "That doesn't mean you should stay away." "They're afraid of me, Lami," Omari replied, his voice heavy. "I've lived with their fear all my life. It's easier this way, but is it better?" Lami pressed, her dark eyes searching his face. "Don't you ever get lonely?" Omari hesitated, then nodded. "I do, but loneliness is better than being hated." Lami reached out and touched his arm, her fingers small against the bulk of his forearm. "Not everyone hates you," she said. "Not everyone is afraid." Omari looked at her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle rush of the river and the distant chirping of crickets. Then, slowly, Omari placed his hand over hers. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It was the first time anyone had touched him with kindness in years. What began as friendship soon blossomed into something deeper. Omari didn't know when it happened, but one day, he realized he couldn't imagine his life without Lami. She had become a part of him, her presence like the steady rhythm of the river, constant and calming. Lami felt it too. It was in the way her heart quickened when she saw him, the way her smile came more easily when he was near. She didn't care about his size or the fear he inspired in others. To her, Omari was gentle, kind, and more human than anyone she'd ever met. But their love was not without consequences. One afternoon, as Lami returned home from the river, her mother intercepted her at the door. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she held a bundle of firewood. "Lami," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing?" "What do you mean?" Lami asked, though she knew exactly what her mother was referring to. "You've been spending too much time with him," her mother said. "People are talking. They're saying bad things." "Let them talk," Lami replied, brushing past her. "I don't care." "But you should care," her mother cried, grabbing her arm. "This isn't just about you. It's about all of us. Your father, your sisters. Do you know what this is doing to us?" Lami pulled her arm free, her expression defiant. "I've done nothing wrong. Omari is not what they say he is." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. If you keep this up, no one will want to marry you. You'll bring shame to our family." "Then so be it," Lami said, her voice steady. "I won't marry someone just to make people happy. I'll marry someone who sees me, who values me for who I am." Her mother stared at her, stunned into silence. Lami walked past her and into the house, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. The village was small, and word spread quickly. Within days, everyone knew about Lami's defiance. Her father, a proud man who valued his reputation above all else, was furious. "You will stop seeing him," he demanded one evening as they sat around the fire. "Do you hear me, Lami? You will stop." "No," Lami said, her voice calm but firm. "I won't." Her father's face turned red with anger. "You're bringing shame to this family. Do you want us to be outcasts? Do you want people to turn their backs on us?" "If they turn their backs, that's their choice," Lami replied. "But I won't turn my back on Omari." Her father rose to his feet, his fists clenched. For a moment, it looked as though he might strike her, but her mother stepped between them. "Please," her mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please let her be." Her father glared at Lami, his chest heaving with rage. "You're no daughter of mine," he spat. "If you want to throw your life away for that thing, then go. But don't come back." The words cut deep, but Lami didn't let them show. She stood, her head held high, and walked out of the house without looking back. She didn't know where she would go, but she knew one thing. She wasn't alone. When Lami arrived at Omari's hut by the river, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the ground. Omari was outside, tending to his garden. He looked up as she approached, his brow furrowing in concern. "Lami," he said, setting down his tools. "What's wrong?" "I can't stay in the village anymore," she said, her voice breaking. "They've disowned me." Omari's expression darkened. "Because of me." "It's not your fault," Lami said quickly. "It's their fear, their ignorance. I chose this, Omari. I chose you." Omari hesitated, then stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. It was the first time they had embraced, and Lami felt safe in his arms, as if nothing in the world could hurt her. "You can stay here," Omari said, "for as long as you want." "Thank you," Lami whispered, burying her face in his chest. From that day on, Lami and Omari began their life together. It wasn't easy. Omari's hut was small, and the villagers' disapproval hung over them like a storm cloud. But they found joy in the simple things. They fished together, tended the garden, and spent long evenings by the fire, sharing stories and dreams. But their happiness was short-lived. One morning, Lami woke up feeling nauseous. At first, she thought it was something she had eaten, but as the days passed, the sickness persisted. Then came the missed moon cycles. Lami was pregnant. Lami's pregnancy changed everything. News spread like wildfire through the village. Even those who had avoided the river, fearing Omari's presence, couldn't help but speak of the baby that was growing inside Lami. A child of a giant and a woman? "It's unnatural," one man said, shaking his head in disbelief. "The spirits will punish us all for allowing this to happen," an elder muttered under her breath, clutching her walking stick tightly as she passed the fields. The whispers grew into a storm of judgment. The villagers claimed the child would bring ruin, that its strength would destroy everything they had built. But amidst their fear, none dared confront Lami directly. Her quiet strength, combined with Omari's towering presence, kept them at bay. But the isolation weighed heavily on her. She was no longer welcome in the village. Even old friends who had once shared laughs and meals with her now turned away when they saw her coming. Omari noticed her sadness, though she tried to hide it. "Are you okay?" he asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Lami looked up from the basket she was weaving, her hands trembling slightly. "It's hard," she admitted, "knowing that I've lost them all. The people I grew up with, the ones who taught me, who cared for me, they see me as a stranger now." Omari's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "You shouldn't have to suffer because of me. You're not the cause," Lami said firmly, reaching for his hand. "Their fear is, you're the only one who has ever truly seen me, Omari. That's enough for me." Omari didn't reply, but his grip on her hand tightened, a silent promise that he would always protect her. As the months went by, Lami's pregnancy became more difficult. Her belly grew larger than anyone had expected, stretching her small frame to its limits. The midwife from the village, who had initially refused to visit her, was finally persuaded by guilt and the elders urging to check on her. You shouldn't be carrying this child, the midwife said bluntly after examining her. It's too big for you. Your body isn't made for this. Lami met her gaze, unflinching. This child is mine. I will carry it. The midwife shook her head, muttering prayers under her breath as she packed her herbs and left. She didn't return after that visit. Omari became Lami's sole caretaker, his hands so used to heavy labor, learning the delicate tasks of cooking, cleaning, and tending to her needs. He stayed by her side every day, his love for her growing stronger with each passing moment. But he couldn't shake the fear that had begun to take root in his heart. "What if something happens to you?" he asked one night, his voice breaking as he knelt beside her. "Then you'll take care of our child," Lami replied, her voice soft but steady. "You'll show them the kindness the world hasn't shown you. Promise me, Omari." "I promise," he said, though his heart ached at the thought. It was a cold, gray morning when Lami went into labor. The skies were heavy with clouds, and the air felt thick with tension, as if the earth itself knew what was about to happen. Omari stayed by her side, his hands trembling as he wiped the sweat from her brow. Lami's cries filled the small hut, a sound that tore through him like a knife. He had never felt so helpless. Hours passed, and Lami grew weaker. Her body, already fragile, struggled to bring the baby into the world. Omari did everything he could, boiling water, bringing blankets, whispering words of encouragement, but nothing could ease her pain. Finally, with one last, heart-wrenching scream, the baby was born. It was a boy, his body large and strong, his cries echoing through the hut like a clap of thunder. Omari held him in his massive hands, marveling at the life they had created. But when he turned to Lami, his joy turned to despair. She was pale, her breathing shallow. Her eyes fluttered open, and she smiled weakly at him. "Omari," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Take care of him. Make sure he knows he is loved." And then, with one final breath, Lami was gone. Omari's roar of anguish shook the walls of the hut. He held her lifeless body close, tears streaming down his face as the baby wailed in his arms. The world seemed to collapse around him, the weight of his loss unbearable. The villagers heard the baby's cries from afar and knew that the child had been born. But no one dared approach the hut. Fear kept them away, their imaginations running wild with thoughts of what the baby might look like. It wasn't until days later that Omari emerged, the baby strapped to his chest with a cloth. His face was lined with grief, his shoulders heavy with the burden of his loss. He walked through the village, his presence silencing everyone in his path. "This is my son," he said, his deep voice cutting through the air. "His name is Mosi. He is my blood, my family. If anyone tries to harm him, they will answer to me." The villagers didn't respond. They simply watched as Omari continued walking, his steps steady despite the weight he carried. From that day on, Omari raised Mosi alone. The boy grew quickly, his size and strength mirroring his father's. By the time he was 5, he was already as tall as some of the village men. But unlike Omari, Mosi was full of life and curiosity. He would run through the fields, chasing butterflies, or sit by the river, asking endless questions about the world. Omari made sure Mosi knew about Lami, the mother who had given everything to bring him into the world. He told him stories of her kindness, her strength, and her unwavering love. "She was the best of us," Omari would say, his voice thick with emotion. "And she lives on in you.